Summer 2010. A 14-year-old kid grips the wheel of a beat-up truck on a Navajo dirt road near Holbrook, Arizona. The speedometer hits 50. The whole thing's rattling. His 9-year-old brother's yelling. It's right behind us, and the dog's barking like crazy in the truck bed. In the rearview mirror, a tall, skinny figure, covered in fur, is running full speed after them. Not a person. Not an animal. Something else. This happened. So did a road vanishing in Colorado, a guy turning into a deer in 1990 Wyoming, and a dead sister's voice on a phone at 3:37 am. March 6, 2025. Science says it's just panic or tricks of the mind. But how do you explain all four? Hit subscribe. We're jumping in. What was chasing that truck? And what's calling from the other side? I'm half Navajo and half Hopi, 29 years old now, and I've been carrying this story since I was 14, which puts it back in the summer of 2010, about 15 years ago. It's something I've only told a handful of people before, and this is the first time. I'm putting it all down in words. My brother, who was just 9 back then, and is a tough-as-nails soldier today, still gets this uneasy look whenever we bring up that evening. Growing up, I'd spend weeks every summer at my grandma's place on the Navajo Reservation near Holbrook, Arizona, and those visits were the best part of my year. I'd sit with her for hours, munching on her fried bread that came out crispy on the edges and soft in the middle, listening to her stories about the old ways, some funny, others downright creepy. One evening, just as the sun was starting to dip below the horizon, Grandma asked me to drive this guy home, someone she'd hired for odd jobs around her house and property. He was the town drunk, a regular around there, but harmless enough, and his shack was about 4 miles out in the valley. At 14, I was more than happy to take her truck out, because on the res, nobody bats an eye at a kid driving, especially out where there's hardly anyone around to notice. My little brother jumped into the cab with me, grinning ear to ear about the adventure, while the worker climbed into the truck bed alongside my dog, this scrappy little mutt who'd bark at anything that moved. We got the guy dropped off at his place without any trouble, a beat-up shack he shared with his brother that looked like it might collapse any day. As we headed back to Grandma's, the sky had turned this deep, glowing red with the sun sinking behind us, and the dirt road kicked up a thick cloud of dust that trailed in our wake. The radio was on, picking up the only station we could get from Holbrook, some faint country song crackling through the static, and everything felt calm, normal, just another quiet drive. Then I caught a flicker of movement in the bushes off to the right, so I eased off the gas, thinking it was probably one of those free-roaming sheep that wander the res and sometimes bolt across the road. Nothing came out, though, so I pressed down on the pedal again and figured it was nothing worth worrying about. That's when this heavy, sinking feeling hit me out of nowhere, a wave of fear and dread that settled in my chest like a stone. I couldn't explain it, but I knew something was off, and as I replay that night in my mind, only a few pieces stand out clear as day. I glanced into the rearview mirror, and my breath caught in my throat because there was something back there. A tall, skinny figure covered in what looked like hair or fur, running full speed after the truck. It wasn't a person, wasn't an animal, just this unnatural thing closing in fast. My brother started crying beside me, his voice breaking as he shouted, "It's coming up on your side!" And the dog in the back went wild, barking so furiously I thought he'd leap out. I slammed my foot on the gas, and the truck lurched forward, shaking hard as we bounced over the washboard ruts. My hands locked tight around the wheel. The figure kept gaining, its long legs pumping in this eerie rhythm, and I could feel the panic clawing up my spine while my brother's sobs filled the cab. I was sure we weren't going to make it, that this was how it'd end, until I swung the truck around a sharp bend and saw headlights cutting through the dusk ahead. Another car was coming our way, and in that split second, the thing behind us was gone, like it'd never been there. Relief flooded through me, loosening the knot in my chest, and we rolled up to Grandma's, still trembling, piling out of the truck and into the house without a single glance back. When we told Grandma what happened, our voices shaky and tripping over the words, she just sat there, calm as ever, which threw us off even more. She started talking about things we'd heard from her before, stories of black magic, witches, and what the Navajo call Yanidlushi, skinwalkers, these evil beings who turn that way by killing someone close, like a friend or a relative. She said we don't speak about them much because acknowledging them draws them nearer, a belief I've held onto ever since, especially after that night. I figure if God's real and out there doing good, then the devil's just as real, showing himself in things like this. I couldn't even bring myself to look out the windows after we got inside, too afraid of what might be staring back. That whole experience stuck with me so deep that I didn't drive on the res at night again until I was 21, which was the summer of 2017, 7 full years later. It scared the living crap out of me and my brother, and even now, with all he's seen as a soldier, he doesn't argue when I say it was real. If you've got doubts, head out to northeastern Arizona sometime and test it for yourself. This one's not my story, it's my parents', and it happened way before I was born, probably back in the 1970s or 80s, though they never pinned down an exact year when they told me about it. They're both Native, raised with all these superstitions that run deep, and they swear that's what kept them alive that night. It was on the $1 Million Highway, this stretch cutting through Red Mountain Pass in Colorado, a road they knew like the back of their hands from driving it so many times. They'd been on a long road trip, hours of winding through mountains, and it was late, somewhere between 2 and 3 in the morning. Dad was behind the wheel, Mom asleep in the passenger seat, slumped against the window with her coat bunched up under her head. That highway's no joke. No guardrails, just these steep drops off the edge that'll swallow you whole if you're not careful, especially in the dark, with only your headlights cutting through the black. Dad always drove slow on that stretch, keeping his eyes peeled, because one wrong move and you're gone. They'd done it plenty before, without a hitch, so he wasn't expecting anything weird. But then, he saw something up ahead that didn't sit right, and his gut started twisting. He reached over and nudged Mom awake, his voice low but sharp, telling her to look at the road. She rubbed her eyes, blinking against the glare of the headlights, and after a second, she saw it too. The curve coming up was wrong. They'd driven this part 100 times, maybe more, and it always bent sharp to the right, hugging the mountain like it was carved into it. There was even a sign they just passed, one of those faded metal ones bolted into the rock, pointing right like it always did. But now, clear as day, the road ahead was turning left instead, stretching out into nothing but shadows. It didn't make sense. They both sat there, staring, trying to figure out what they were seeing, because it wasn't just tired eyes playing tricks. The pavement was there, solid under the lights, curving left like it'd always been that way, even though they knew damn well it shouldn't. Dad said later it felt like the silence was choking them, this thick, heavy quiet that pressed down as they got closer to the bend. Mom's voice broke at first, a scream ripping out of her as she yelled, "Turn right!" But Dad was already yanking the wheel, his hands moving before she even finished. He didn't trust what he saw, not with everything in him screaming that right was the way it had always been. The tires squealed, the car lurched hard, and for a second, they both thought they were going over anyway, that they'd missed it and were headed straight for the drop. But then the road was there, the real one, curving right around the mountain just like it was supposed to, solid and familiar under the wheels. Whatever they'd seen going left was gone. No trace of it, like it had evaporated into the night. All that was left where that fake path had been was a sheer cliff, a black void that would have taken them down hundreds of feet if they'd followed it. They didn't say much after that, just kept driving. Mom wide awake now, gripping the edge of her seat, while Dad's knuckles stayed white on the steering wheel. When they finally got home, he told her he thought it was a trickster, one of those spirits they'd grown up hearing about, something that messes with your head and tries to lead you straight to your grave. Mom nodded, didn't argue, because she felt it too, that whatever they saw wasn't natural. They've always been superstitious, raised on stories of things out there that don't play by our rules. And Dad swears that trusting their instincts over their eyes is the only reason they're still here. I've driven that road myself since, during the day, and it's always right. Never left. But I can't shake what they told me. They saw what they saw, and it wasn't a dream or a shadow. Something wanted them off that cliff, and if they hadn't known better, I wouldn't be here telling you this. The Clown Man Mystery. Back around 1990, something dark went down in Fort Washakie, Wyoming, a small reservation town where everybody knows everybody. A bunch of kids started taking their own lives, one after another, and it hit the community hard because nobody could figure out why. These were young ones, barely into their teens, and it didn't make sense. Not in a place where folks look out for each other. People were whispering, praying, trying to piece it together, until one kid, who'd been right on the edge of doing it himself, finally opened up about what he'd seen. He said there was this guy, someone he called the Clown Man, who'd been talking to him, telling him death was this beautiful thing waiting on the other side. Now, when the parents heard that, they pressed him for more, asking if this was some circus clown with a painted face and a red nose. The kid shook his head, said no, nothing like that. He described a man with long, straight hair hanging past his shoulders, and these dark glasses that hid his eyes, the kind you couldn't see through. He didn't sound like some random drifter either. The way the kid talked, this guy had a way of getting into your head, calm and smooth, promising peace if you just followed what he said. Then another kid piped up, said he'd seen this same clown man one night out near the edge of town, and right in front of him, the guy turned into a deer, just melted into this animal shape, and took off running. That's when the rumors started spreading fast, fear creeping into every house. Folks didn't know what to make of it, whether this was a spirit, a shapeshifter, or something worse, but parents didn't waste time debating. They sat their kids down, told them flat out not to talk to strangers, especially anyone matching that description, and to stay close to home when the sun went down. The whole town got quiet after dark, doors locked tight, people keeping an eye out from their windows. Nobody had a name for what this thing was, and the not knowing made it worse. Was it tied to old stories, something from the tribal past, or just some sick guy playing tricks? Either way, it felt like a shadow hanging over Fort Washakie, and those suicides kept weighing on everybody's mind. Then one night, over in Charlietown, the tribal housing area just outside town, things came to a head. A group of kids started yelling, their voices cutting through the stillness, shouting about the clown man being out in the field nearby. An old man who lived there, one of the elders who'd seen a lot in his years, overheard them and asked what was going on. The kids, wide-eyed and jumpy, told him this guy was out there right then, talking to some other youngsters, coaxing them to hurt themselves like he'd done with the others. The old man didn't hesitate. He grabbed his eagle feather, this sacred thing he kept wrapped up in a cloth above his door, something he'd been given long ago for protection, and headed out to see for himself. When he got to the field, there he was, the clown man, standing under the moonlight like he owned the place. The elder said he was dressed sharp, nicer than most folks around there, with a clean shirt and pants that looked pressed, his long hair hanging down straight, and those dark glasses, glinting even in the dim light. He didn't say a word to the old man, just stood there for a moment, staring, before he turned and bolted toward a ditch at the edge of the field. The elder started after him, holding that feather up like a shield. But he didn't get far. Something leapt out of the ditch, a deer, all muscle and antlers, and it tore off into the night, disappearing into the brush. That was it. No tracks from a man, No sign of where he'd gone, just the deer and the silence after. Nobody ever figured it out. The kid stopped dying after that. Like whatever it was had moved on, but the questions never went away. I heard this from people who were there, folks who still live in Fort Washakie, and they don't talk about it much now. Not unless you ask. That clown man left a mark, though, a mystery nobody solved. And every time I drive through those fields, I wonder what those kids really saw back in 1990. The voice from beyond. My name's Paul, and this is about my sister, who I lost just a month ago in February 2025. It's March 6 now, and I'm still not convinced she took her own life. Not when she didn't leave a note, didn't say a word to me or anyone else beforehand. We were tight, only a year apart, grew up practically joined at the hip, always talking about everything. She was my go-to person, and I was hers, so her being gone like that, with no explanation, just doesn't add up in my head. What happened this morning, though, has me rattled beyond anything I've ever felt. And I need to get it out, figure out what it means, because I'm lost right now. It was 3:37 a.m., still dark outside, and I was asleep next to my girlfriend in our apartment. Both of us dead to the world after a long day. The phone rang, this sharp, jarring sound that yanked me out of sleep. And I could tell it woke her up too, because she stirred beside me, mumbling something groggy. I fumbled for my phone on the nightstand, squinting at the screen, and saw the time right there. 3:37, with private number glowing above it. Normally, I'd let those calls go, figuring it's some scam or wrong number. But I was half awake, brain foggy, and thought maybe it was a buddy drunk somewhere needing a ride home. So I swiped to answer, pressed it to my ear, and said hello, my voice scratchy from sleep. All I got back was this muffled static, like a bad connection or an old radio between stations, just hissing in my ear. I said hello again, louder this time, thinking whoever it was couldn't hear me, but still nothing. Just that noise. I was about to hang up, annoyed, figuring it was some prank or glitch, when I heard it. My name. Paul, clear as if someone was right there with me. It was her voice, my sister's. The same soft way she'd always said it, unmistakable even through the haze of sleep. My whole body locked up, heart slamming against my ribs, and I couldn't move, couldn't think. Just sat there frozen with the phone, pressed hard against my ear. In a panic, I started saying her name over and over, almost begging it to be her, my voice cracking as I tried to make sense of it. I managed to choke out, "Where are you?" Because I had to know, had to hear more. And for a second, there was silence, just that static, humming low. Then this scream hit, so loud and shrill, it felt like it was inside my skull, blasting through the phone and making me flinch. It cut off fast, and the line went dead, just the dial tone buzzing in its place. I dropped the phone onto the bed, hands shaking, and turned to my girlfriend, who was sitting up now, looking at me confused. She asked why I was saying my sister's name, her voice sleepy but worried, and that's when it all crashed down on me. I broke, crying harder than I ever have, this ugly, messy sobbing that I couldn't stop, tears soaking the sheets while she tried to hold me together. I didn't go back to sleep after that, couldn't even try. I just sat there on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone in my hands, waiting for it to ring again, for something else to happen, but it stayed silent. That call's been eating at me all day, and I've been posting about it online, asking around on forums, because I need answers. I went to a psychic a few hours ago, but she didn't give me anything solid, just vague stuff that felt like a waste of time. I'm planning to see a medium soon, someone who might actually connect with her, but people keep suggesting a Ouija board, and I'm not sure about that. I've heard stories, bad ones, about those things going wrong, and I'm already scared enough as it is. I don't know what to do next. Should I tell my family? They're still grieving too, and I don't want to mess them up more if this was nothing. But it didn't feel like nothing. It felt real, like she was reaching out. Or maybe something else was using her voice to get to me. I'm confused, torn up, and honestly terrified, sitting here wondering if I'll hear her again tonight. If anyone's got advice, I'm begging for it, because I can't shake this, and I need to know what happened. So there you have it, 4 stories that stretch from a skinwalker chasing a truck down a dusty Arizona road in the summer of 2010, to a phone ringing with a dead sister's voice at 3:37 am on March 6, 2025. These aren't just old legends or campfire spooks. They're real moments that happen to real people, and they make you realize the unknown isn't some far-off thing. It's right here, brushing up against us when we least expect it. That Navajo teen, my parents on that haunted highway, those kids in Fort Washakie back in 1990, and Paul, they all swear by what they saw and heard. And honestly, after digging into this stuff, I'm starting to feel the same way. There's too much here to brush off as coincidence or imagination. Too many details that line up across years and miles. I want to know what you think about all this. Drop your theories down in the comments, whether you've got an explanation or just a wild guess, and I'll pin the one that gives me the biggest chills. If you've got your own story, something creepy that's happened to you or someone you know, send it over for the next video, because I'd love to keep this going with more from you guys. If these freaked you out even a little, smash that like button. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button too, because there's more where this came from. We've got something cooking for next time. A little less paranormal, but just as unsettling. So stick around for that. Thanks for watching, and let's keep peeling back the shadows together.